Happy Monday. It is December 7th, so we have 17 days left of our Advent year following this. And I am really glad that I've gotten past my technology hurdle. Things got figured out after the disastrous attempt that was yesterday's video. And I want to thank, the handful of people who have been watching this and really trying to give me that encouragement to keep going. I don't have to be great at something to like doing it, and I really do enjoy reviewing tea because I like drinking tea, and this gives me something creative to do and to learn. Yesterday's video, I did actually try some fancier video editing techniques, which was great, and I will eventually figure out what to do about the cats, but for now, one day at a time. So if you are struggling with anything, just one day at a time. If I can do it and overcome every sign in the universe basically saying this is a dumb idea, you should stop doing it now, you can definitely work through it in small incremental chunks. And if you need to, because it's a few of you that I actually know personally, reach out. I'm happy to talk to you. All right, so let's talk a bit about today's tea while Khan comes back and joins me and attempts to destroy everything. Today, I have a red box today. Today is vanilla cappuccino. And already through that tin, you can see some coffee beans. So that's potentially disconcerting for those of you who like tea but do not drink coffee. So already you might be telling yourself, steer clear. All right, so today's tea has apple, black tea, rose hips, candied pineapple, coffee beans, natural coffee flavoring with stevia extract, and artificial vanilla and cream flavorings. So we're really working on trying to build something that's going to taste reminiscent of a vanilla cappuccino. Okay. All right. Ooh, this smells like a vanilla cappuccino, so I'm super into it. I'm a big coffee drinker. I try not to discriminate against hot beverages. I will drink tea, I drink coffee, I drink hot chocolate, I drink glog, I drink Glühwein. If you can warm it up and reasonably call it a tasty and somewhat sweet liquid, I'm all about it. I do actually drink coffee black most of the time, but I do also indulge in my super sugary lattes, and I have no qualms about that. I'm absolutely someone who likes my pumpkin spice, caramel brulee, whatever. I like my coffee how I can get it. So this particular tea is going to steep at that 95°C, 3 to 5 minute time range. This actually, interestingly, only has 1 pip on that caffeine rating that David's Tea provides on the back of their box, so I am kind of curious about that. I mean, it smells really, really good, guys. I'm excited about it. All right. So we have a pretty big set of chunks in today's tea. I can definitely find my candied pineapple. That's immediately identifiable for me. And this, again, this wrinkly, squishy bit, like I identified in the last video, that's apple. So we've got that. There's some black tea for us. Got that. Coffee bean. Check. All right, let's see. The only thing I'm not super sure that I could identify for you is a rose hip. Maybe it is this slightly redder leaf here. I've got some black leaves there, which is definitely that black tea. I'm thinking maybe that's a rose hip. And I'm sure that the other flavorings come in with all those little speckles that you're seeing on my dried apple chunks. That's probably what those other flavors are. So all good on that. I mean, come on, we got candied pineapple, good. Dried apple, good. Coffee, good. This I am anticipating is going to be delicious. Once again, with these bigger chunk teas, that's probably what contributes to not having as much tea in the canister here. So that's going to be a little bit less as far as what I can get out of it. Grabbing my bag. So I'm wondering how many of you are placing bets as far as what I actually forget in a given video and have to go and be like, oh right, I need to do that. So today it was the bag and had to reach over and grab that. You know, we could make a bingo game out of this. How many times do I stammer and stutter and say or which is an embarrassing number considering the fact that I do a lot with speech and debate. But, you know, trying to do this in such a way that it doesn't look super scripted. I do have notes, which is where my gaze goes, but trying to make it look not super scripted. And I am reserving some tea here back. One, I don't think I need all of it to get a powerful steep in that cup, but two, in case something goes disastrously wrong, I have a backup. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit my water. Didn't forget that one this time. All right. In terms of talking about ingredients today, I mostly want to focus on apple and on coffee. I know those are not super interesting ingredients, but I've already kind of touched base on candied pineapple, and there's not really a ton else in this tea for me to talk about. I could definitely talk about rose hips or rose petals in general, but I also know from, again, having read the back of the box that I do have other teas where rose is an ingredient. So I want to make sure that I'm trying to get through ingredients that are not going to overlap too much, and I don't really expect that there's going to be a ton of overlap with the coffee. And at this point, we've seen apple come up quite a bit, so it's about time to talk about apple. I really doubt that I'm going to tell you anything that you don't already know about apple or about coffee, so I'm going to go ahead and try and do my best to find something that's at least interesting and you go, oh yeah, I remember hearing that. Or maybe on the rare side here, I might actually catch some of you who have not done any of this research and don't know any of this. I will tell you that if you go ahead and open up a search engine and just search for apple, you should specify that you are searching for the fruit or the plant, because otherwise you get an entire first page of results all about the company and those associated products. So that's an interesting sort of development, but it definitely reflects how our society has progressed. I do wonder what it says about the health of our society, however. So apples are actually a really old fruit. We know that they have been cultivated for thousands of years. They originally started in Asia and in Europe, and then settlers brought them over to the New World. Again, we talked about the idea of bringing cultures and traditions and things along those lines with you, and that includes whatever produce you can. And along those lines, we also know that many cultures, including Greek culture, the Norse culture, and of course, Christian culture and traditions, have a lot of religious and mythological associations with apples. It's forbidden fruit, it's temptation, at least in that Christian tradition, and apples can also be tied to some things with the underworld, depending on what translation you get, for instance, with Hades and Persephone. Traditionally, I've seen it as a pomegranate, though, and that's the number of pomegranate seeds that she eats that dictates how long she has to stay in the underworld out of a given year. But some translations use it as an apple. Today, there are more than 7,500 known cultivars of apples, and that results in a range of desired characteristics. You might be asking yourself, what's a cultivar? Well, a cultivar is a basic classification category of a desirable characteristic, which is known in the International Code of Nomenclature for Cultivated Plants. It's an actual thing, the ICNCP. And this particular organization and code keeps track of the cultivars for flower color, the flower size, the flavor profile, how much yield you get out of a particular crop, and so on. So it's a much larger kind of control situation compared to even, say, like our gingerbread guild from yesterday. because this is international. We do use those cultivars, of course, to actually breed together the desired characteristics based on the different tastes and uses. Cooking apples are actually going to be significantly different from apples that you would use for ciders, and those in turn are going to be different from the apples that you would use for raw eating. Certainly you can definitely do all those kinds of things with them, but they're not going to have the same flavor profile because they're not intended for that same purpose. Consequently, we actually, because of those 7,500 cultivars, we actually have 7,500 known varieties of apple. And that's insane. Interestingly, 2,500 of those varieties of apple are all grown in the United States. And so you can typically get apples year-round because one of the cultivars for it is actually a winter hardiness. So that's pretty cool. It's not going to be necessarily the same kind of apple that you're used to, but there are winter apples. Today, worldwide production of apples annually reaches at least 86 million tons, and China accounts for about half of that. So we have quite a lot of apples in circulation throughout the year, and you might like apple, you might not like apple, but they're everywhere. So hooray! When it comes to as far as how you use apple in, say, like apple tea, and as I talk about that, I'm going to go ahead and measure out and pour my water. But apple tea is actually its own entire thing, and it's pretty common in Turkey and the Middle East. You can actually find all kinds of recipes for making your own at home. You can also buy apple tea in tea bags, but when you make it at your own home, it's typically a way to try and reduce food waste because you'll use the apple peel itself as essentially a giant tea leaf. I have not done this myself, but I know many people who have, and they swear by it. They think it's absolutely a really delicious kind of treat. It's a great alternative if you don't really like the intense sweetness of an apple cider, and if you don't want to have as much sugar content as that cider or even as apple juice, and potentially if you don't like other teas. A lot of people swear by this. And of course you can dress it up with all kinds of other spices if you want. Sorry, my notes just turned pages on me there. There's actually, about apples, a commonly circulated myth or fact that eating an apple in the morning will wake you up better than consuming a cup of coffee. So there's some of that tie-in there. I actually did think a little bit about this one today. That myth is actually false. What you're experiencing if you are eating an apple in the morning is you're actually experiencing a more sustained energy throughout the day, because apples have a simpler form of sugar. They have fructose, and then they have fiber, which helps keep you fuller longer. And since your body doesn't have to spend quite so much energy breaking down more complex sugar, fructose is already pretty simple, your body's able to make a little bit more efficient use out of that as energy, which is going to give you that more sustained kind of energy and that more endurance, that greater endurance kind of longevity feel of wakefulness as you're getting going in the morning. Now, of course, because apples don't have caffeine, they won't have that stimulant effect that coffee does. So potentially the real big takeaway from this is to have an apple with your cup of coffee. Now, coffee, we know, comes from coffee beans, which are the seeds of coffee berries of the Coffea species. And when the coffee berries are ripe, they are bright red, and then we pick them, we process them, which means washing them and separating the actual berry and all that kind of stuff from the bean, and we dry it all out. Okay? Once we have dried those beans, which are really just seeds, that's when they go ahead and get circulated for roasting. It is the roasting process that gives coffee the flavors that we look for when we are drinking that cup of coffee. Coffee as on its own, basically, if you don't add anything to it, you know it's going to be a little acidic, you know it's going to be a bit bitter. But the beeping tells me that my card is now full on my other camera. So yay, one more technology thing that I get to deal with later. I'll deal with that and figure out how I'm going to show you the color of the tea in a bit. But regardless, coffee is actually one of the most popular drinks in the world, in part because you can prepare it in so many different ways. You can add milk to it, you can drink it straight, you can of course do the TikTok viral situation of the dalgona coffee or the whipped coffee sort of situation using instant coffee. There's a lot you can do with coffee. So it's consumed pretty much globally, actually. The earliest credible evidence that we have of coffee drinking as we would recognize it comes from the middle of the 15th century in Yemen, and the beans were sourced to that region from the Ethiopian highlands with Somali traders. So going along and engaging in trade the way that everything happens, right? But by the 16th century, coffee had reached the rest of the Middle East and into North Africa before it eventually did spread to Europe and then, of course, to North America and globally. Over 70 countries actively cultivate coffee today, and the most common bean types are going to be that Arabica and Rustica bean type. And as of 2018, Brazil is actually the leading producer of coffee with 35% of that global total. So lots of coffee comes from South America. As a note, although we do mostly at that 70% level consume Arabica, I really don't know how to pronounce it all that well, but that Arabica coffee is at 70% of our consumption, and then basically the rest is predominantly made up of Robusta or Liberica. There are actually 100 species of coffee out there, which we actually track with cultivars. So that word that I just taught you about when we were talking about apples also applies to coffee, because coffee is a cultivated plant. So that ICNCP does cover coffee as well. The most expensive coffee beans in the world are not the coffee beans that come from the civet poop, which you may have seen circulating. That is actually called the kopi or kopi luwak, and that passes through the intestines of a small cat-like mammal in Indonesia, and then they collect that and dry it out and do the same processing that we would expect. But instead of that, the most expensive is actually black ivory coffee, which, given the name, we should expect that it passes through the intestinal tract of an elephant in rural Thailand. The tasting notes of this coffee are supposed to be chocolate, spice, and grass, but the long fermentation process in the elephant's stomach should also draw out fruity notes, which makes sense because coffee is a berry, and also produce apparently a mild tea-like flavor. You can get this coffee for $818.18 per pound, whereas the civet coffee is only $299.55 per pound. So great savings there if you want to have really super expensive coffee. There's actually a coffee that's between those two, and it's available by auction only, and that comes in at around $600 per pound. So definitely coffee can get up there quite a bit, but it makes you definitely rethink that $6 latte. It's a little bit more palatable, don't you think? All right, so at this point, I can actually see that I've got a good color going on my tea. I'm a little bummed that I don't have my main camera where I use this to show you. But we'll see if I can actually angle this in such a way without spilling it everywhere. You can kind of see just from the color of the tea bag that we've got a good, nice, rich, kind of caramely color. All right. Excuse the face. There, okay. So once again, we've got really nice clear liquor going here. It's a beautiful, clear kind of quality, straight to the bottom of the cup, and it's got that nice, rich, caramely color going on there. And I will tell you, if I had to guess based on smell alone, if you put this and a cappuccino in front of me, I would probably be able to smell that there's something different between them, but I don't know that I'd be able to tell you what the difference was. And certainly by smell alone, I would think that this was a cup of coffee. So definitely, if you are not a coffee drinker, do not get this particular coffee. Even if you, see, there you go. I'm thinking it's coffee already. Do not get this particular tea. Just don't. Even if you think that you can tend to handle coffee smells, or you like the smell of coffee, if you don't like the taste, you are probably really not going to like this tea. It has a really nice flavor. It is a bit like having a vanilla cappuccino, but one that has been watered down so that way you can make it last longer. That's the impression that I get here. And so it might be a little disappointing, kind of disappointing, but I think ultimately with a potentially longer steep, greater quantity of the tea, if I'd actually used that entire tin, I probably would have a little bit richer of a flavor on here. And then again, adding a little bit of cream, maybe a little bit of sugar into this would really help drive home that vanilla cappuccino taste. But I wouldn't want to add too much, really, because even though it's a little bit of a weaker flavor, it's still very pleasant. I definitely like it better than the gingerbread blondie that I had yesterday. In terms of thinking about where it goes, it also goes above the mint. I do think I put it above Let It Snow. And now I just have to decide whether or not I think it beats out the chocolate chili chai. I am actually going to say I do think this one for me beats out the chocolate chili chai, but it's still not quite up to that chocolate covered almond. So we'll have to see if by the end of this I have found a tea that beats that. But for now, that's the one to beat. Thank you very, very much for your ongoing patience and sticking with me, and I will be back tomorrow.